Folks, welcome back to another episode of Coffee, Tea, and Crime. Today, chemical-soaked rag. Folks, today we're going to be in the town of Burlington, Vermont. Now, this little town's only about 45 miles south of the Canadian border. Now, it is the most populous city in the great state of Vermont. Got about 44,000 people. Now, located in that town is University of Vermont. Now, there's a movie that I thought about reading on this case, and it was called The Vanishing, 1993. Jeff Bridges and Kiefer Sutherland. Jeff Bridges is a serial killer. He disables his victims by using chloroform on a rag. And as we're going to see in this case here, we know it was used by the suspect in some of the cases against him, which were not homicides but sexual assaults. We're going to see that our suspect usually liked to assault young girls, 10, 12 years old. Now, unfortunately, the one victim we know of that he killed was a grown woman. Now, her name was Michelle Gardner Quinn. Now, she was a senior. She was majoring in Latin American Studies and Environmental Science there at the university. Now, she was from Virginia, so she wasn't too far down the road from home. That's October the 7th, 2006. It's early in the morning. Now, Miss Quinn, she had been out on the town there in Burlington celebrating a friend's birthday. Now, somehow or another, she got separated from her group. So now she was going to use her phone to call her friends to see where they were at. Well, her cell phone was dead. Now, she happens to run across this fella who's our suspect, and she asked to borrow his phone so she could call her friends. Now, our suspect, if you looked at a picture of him, he's mild-mannered looking. Doesn't look like he'd harm a fly. So she makes her phone call. It's about 2 o'clock in the morning or so, 2:30. Then the call ends, and then no one will see her alive again. Now, she had called a friend of hers. He was from back in Arlington, Virginia, just like her. He said when he got that call, he said, didn't sound like anything was amiss, everything good to go. Told him I'd call him from this fella's phone, and don't know what else was said, but nothing struck him as being unusual. So he said he didn't think another thing about it. Now, she was reported missing later that day by her parents. They were up there for the festivities they were having that weekend there at the university. So then they get to looking for her. Well, of course, they talked to the friend that spoke to her on the phone. He told them about what time she'd called. So they get to checking cameras in the area, and they find footage of her walking with this individual whose phone she was evidently using. So, of course, our suspect, he becomes the police's primary suspect because he was the last one to see her. Now, that video that the police had, it came from a jewelry store surveillance camera there on Main Street. Nothing looked out of place on the footage. Now, obviously, the friend, he'd gotten that phone call, so he had the number for this male. In fact, he called the male that Saturday when everybody started getting concerned about her. Now, what he told the police was, well, I called him, and he said he didn't really tell me a whole lot. He just said that he had saw her walking up the hill towards the dorms. So the police key in on him, and they get to looking at his history, and it's not a very pleasant history. Now, 6 days go by. It's October the 13th. two things happened on that day. Number one, Miss Quinn's body was found not too far from the town of Richmond, Vermont. It just happens to be the town where our suspect lives. Now, her body was found close to a roadway near the Huntington Gorge. A group of hikers had found the body. It was stuffed into a small depression there at the top of a cliff. It happens to be near a popular swimming hole there in the Huntington River. Now, the body was half dressed and had been covered with leaves. Now, they did an autopsy, showed that Miss Quinn had been sexually assaulted. Cause of death was strangulation and blunt force trauma to the head. Now, obviously, they checked the body, they found sperm, they did a DNA test, and it came back to the suspect. Now, what I'm curious about is, okay, we see the video of the victim and the suspect, and they're walking down the street. Now, I know she died of blunt force trauma, but now is that how he subdued her? Or did he use this little chemical rag that he used on younger victims? And also, he's got to plan this attack. He can't just knock this woman out or give her a smell of the chloroform and start toting a body down the road. Somebody's going to notice, even in a small town. And I wonder if he was out on the prowl or was this just a random act. Resource material doesn't state what the suspect ever told the police. He pled not guilty, so I'm assuming he never gave the police a statement, but I'm sure the police had a theory. His car had to have been close by, and I doubt she would have got into the car with a stranger, so I'm thinking shortly after that video was seen is when he made his attack on her, and would have been close to where his car was. Now, also on October 13th, suspect, they snatched him up, put him in jail. Now, that was not related to the recovery of Miss Quinn's body, because it's going to be some days and some weeks before they get around to being able to charge him with her murder. Now, it seems that the town of St. Johnsbury, which is about 80 miles down the road from Burlington, suspect was accused of using chemical-soaked rags to render victims unconscious and unable to resist his sexual advances, according to the affidavit filed by the police. Now, in 1996 and 1998, he was accused of sexually assaulting a young lady when she was 12 and later when she was 14, and had done the same to some other girls, or had tried to. Now, they had, I believe, warrants from 3 different jurisdictions regarding the same kind of activity. So that's what he was held in jail on while they're trying to get their case together on this kidnapping and murder and sexual assault. Now, I don't know what became of those other charges in those other jurisdictions involving these underage girls, but I do know he went on trial. Main evidence against him was the DNA, obviously. The video and the phone call helps. It puts him with the victim, but the DNA is what cinches the case for the jury. Now, the defense attorney tried to make light of the fact that there was very little semen found in the victim's body that belonged to his client, but a little or a lot, his client's DNA was in the victim. So the good folks of Vermont found him guilty. Now, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole October 17th, 2008.